Among the Jedi, Dooku was already considered to be a formidable fighter and very powerful in the Force, but as a Sith, he reached levels of power that had never been seen in all the years of his life. As an older man, Dooku accepted the ways of the dark side, and because of it, he actually became a match for his old master in Yoda, specifically with the lightsaber, and became so powerful that even Sidious was becoming jealous and wary of him. In the Clone Wars series, as well as in the comics, we often see how powerful and ruthless Dooku is. There is no one who can stand against him. Even when 3 Night Sisters attack him while invisible, plus Dooku being poisoned, he still managed to defeat all of them without so much as suffering a scratch. But yet, when we see this man again in Revenge of the Sith, he looks tired and weak. In the novelization, his age is put at the forefront of the page, and it is mentioned several times that he is being weakened because of his physical age. But is that all there is to it? Dooku may have been 83 in Revenge of the Sith, but that means he was already 80 at the start of the Clone War. So what happened to Dooku? Why was it that he was so weak after only 3 years of wielding the dark side and 3 years of war? Well, my acolytes, it's time to open up yet another holocron and discover the truth of what really happened to Count Dooku. At first, we need to be clear. When we say Dooku is weak, we do not mean weak overall, but simply weaker in comparison to his previous version. Now, there is something to be said about an older Force wielder not being able to accomplish the same feats as their younger selves. This, of course, is a given. We know it happens to Sidious even when he is 87 in Return of the Jedi, and we saw it happen to Qui-Gon Jinn in his 60s. Qui-Gon, who got tired out pretty quickly after a brief duel with Maul, not to mention having to adjust his lightsaber form to accommodate for his advanced age. Even Yoda, as powerful and as hardened as he is, doesn't sustain fights for very long, and instead produces a volley of attacks or force feats before being tuckered out. However, it needs to be restated that we didn't see this kind of weakness from Dooku only a couple of years prior to Revenge of the Sith. In fact, according to the timeline of events, Dooku's duel with Anakin and Obi-Wan on Obadiah only happened around a year prior to the duel on the Invisible Hand. But let's examine the duel on Obadiah first. Here, we can see Dooku manhandling the 2 Jedi with relative ease, only now beginning to have trouble with Skywalker's growing abilities. In this duel, Dooku moves like a dancer, even employing acrobatics in his fighting form, which is completely foreign to the traditional form of Makashi, leading us to theorize that Dooku has achieved a version of Makashi far beyond anybody else. Following the duel, if Dooku is tired at all, he doesn't show it, and only retreats whenever the Pikes begin to fire upon him. If the Pikes had not arrived, it's completely reasonable that he could have taken Obi-Wan and Anakin at once. In another powerful feat of combat ability, Dooku takes on Savage and Ventress at the same time, only being overpowered by the growing rage of Savage Opress, who was using the pain Dooku inflicted on him as pure dark side adrenaline. And even as powerful as Savage was, Dooku kept him neutralized with Force Lightning for the majority of the fight, with Savage even calling him too powerful. And then, Dooku would be poisoned by the Night Sisters, invisible Night Sisters, his senses dulled. Here, not only did Dooku fend off 3 attackers at once, and it should be stated that Makashi is notoriously weak on multiple opponents, something that Ventress knew, but Dooku in this engagement didn't suffer a single injury. He levitated 3 Night Sisters into the air, and poured his absolute hatred into them in the form of Force Lightning. Let's not also forget that Dooku defeated Ventress a final time in the novel Dark Disciple, while at the same time defeating the Jedi Master Quinlan Vos, and this only happened a few months prior to the Battle of Coruscant and his final duel with Skywalker. The point we're illustrating is Dooku was plenty powerful during the Clone Wars and was very close to being indomitable completely. Perhaps only Yoda and Sidious were the real rivals to Dooku in his prime. But of course, there are several times where we see Dooku struggling against Skywalker's power specifically. He defeats Anakin almost every time during the Clone Wars, but it slowly becomes more and more difficult and clear that he is becoming outmatched. Their duel on Naboo is the closest that Anakin gets to actually defeating Dooku one-on-one. He beat Dooku down on the stairs in front of the Chancellor, and it was only due to Dooku's superior powers in the dark side that he was able to outdo the younger Jedi. On Obadiah, it is visually implied that ironically, it was Obi-Wan who was holding Anakin back in this fight. Dooku kept putting Obi-Wan in danger, forcing Anakin to break his concentration in order to save his master. In fact, on this duel, it is one of the few times where Anakin is not outright defeated by Dooku. This would be their final duel before the Invisible Hand. And now, we have seen Anakin Skywalker's power eclipse Dooku as he grew more and more skilled, talented, and focused after every clash of the blade. In the novelization for Revenge of the Sith, it describes Anakin's blows as unstoppable and overpowering. It explains that Dooku is feeling every single moment of his 83 years, and in this iconic line, every strike from Anakin was aging him a decade. It explains that Dooku has to spend lavishly on his force reserves just to block the young Skywalker's strikes, and soon he has to stop blocking them head on and simply direct them away from him as Skywalker's power becomes too much for the aged Sith. It's astonishing how powerful Skywalker has become, especially from Dooku's perspective. The Count is terrified for his life, and the novel explains it. With that said, many would say it was not Dooku's weakness, but Anakin's strength that won the day. However, this is not entirely true. Dooku wasn't what he once was as a young man, as the Attack of the Clones and Tales of the Jedi Dooku would have been a better match for Skywalker in this moment. It's also important to mention that in the Revenge of the Sith novelization, it's revealed that Dooku becomes terrified not only of Skywalker, but Kenobi as well, realizing that his version of Sarisu is so fast and so impenetrable, and this is why Dooku decided to use the Force against Kenobi, giving up on blade-to-blade combat, a rarity to be sure. So now, what happened to Dooku? Why is this man on the Invisible Hand so different from his previous version? The entire problem lies in the secret weakness to the dark side itself, the thing which grants instantaneous power, but at a terrible, corruptible price. The price is alluded to, but never spoken of. Physical scarring is the only surface level problems that come from the dark side toll on one's body. As Mace Windu put it, it is a torch that burns bright, but quickly burns out. Even Sidious himself commented on it. The dark side ravages the flesh. I believe I might sustain my life only by transferring it to a younger body of a cloned host. Decades of wielding such power will leave one a deflated husk. We just haven't yet seen anyone get to that point yet, besides Sidious. Not to mention that many Sith die prematurely. But the Sith are well aware of these deformities and embrace it. One Sith during the Old Republic, named Lord Scourge, was shocked and even disgusted at the sight of a Sith sorceress named Darth Nihilus. Despite her actually being a young woman, she was so disfigured that he found it difficult to even look upon her. And although she was powerful in the Force, she ultimately turned out to be far too physically weak to properly protect herself when Revan used her own Force lightning against her, a moment that disintegrated her instantly. All of this is a direct dichotomy to the gifts of the light, which provides a slower and more steady stream of power, but will sustain one for much longer. But why did the darkness affect Dooku so quickly? Well, there are two reasons. The first reason has to do with the Clone Wars itself. Dooku was under constant stress, more stress than he ever had to deal with as a Jedi. The emotional and physical toll it took for someone of his age to be fighting as ferociously as he was dealing with all of the galactic war on top of it. This began to deteriorate his form. Stress takes a larger physical toll on people than most realize, and it can absolutely break someone down in a matter of months. Because Dooku was so old and joined the dark side so late, his body hadn't properly adjusted to this new amount of power output. Dooku was one of the few who has been a Jedi his entire life, before ultimately suddenly switching to the darkness, a fact that is not healthy on the body. A body which has been used and has grown used to the invigorating nature of the light side, and having that suddenly stripped away and in its place the deteriorating powers of the dark. Dooku was old, and physically he was going downhill, but the light had been sustaining him all this time. Just look at him in Tales of the Jedi compared to his appearances in Attack of the Clones. When the dark side took over, it rapidly advanced his age. He was unfamiliar with the power output and all of the physically demanding tasks he was performing, and it is for this reason why Dooku was severely weakened, especially at the conclusion of the Clone Wars. This toll of the dark side is far too understated. As much power as Sidious held in Return of the Jedi, he had to use a cane. The dark side is a curse, an illness, and it took the very life essence from Dooku. But anyway, my friends, thank you so much for watching and acknowledging our archives. May the Force be with you, and have a great day.